This is Fireside Chats with me, Johnny B. All right. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for tuning back in. This is Fireside Chats with me, Johnny B. And today we are talking with another good friend of mine from Fellowship of Parks here in Hazlet, Texas, Matt Hayes, Marine Corps veteran. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem, man. So, we talked earlier, basic format of the show. So, for everyone tuning in, if this is your first time, we're talking with fellow veterans, just letting them tell their stories and how their relationship with Christ was able to bring them through the trauma and redeem those that history, those hurts from their past, and bring them back into the glory of the kingdom. So with that, hey,
Hey.
so tell us about your story, man. Where are you from? How did that take you into joining the Marines?
Well, actually, I'm kind of from all over. I was born and raised in Northern California. When I was about 6 years old, my dad took a job. My dad was a principal.
Mm.
My dad took a job in Taipei, Taiwan.
Oh, wow.
So from 1972 to 1975, we lived in Taipei.
That's cool.
And yeah, and my dad worked for, like I said, the American school there. And we kind of thought when we were kids, my mom worked for an airline. She come to find out when my brother and I both got older, my mom was actually working for Air America as a teletype operator. With all the
Oh,
classified
wow.
material about the Vietnam War. So yeah, we always ask her. She's, did you read anything that came off? She said, yeah, I wasn't supposed to read any of it. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
mom, but did you read any of it? She's like, I read every single thing. So my mom, little, 5 foot tall, secretary probably knew as much about the Vietnam War as the folks in the Pentagon.
Oh, wow.
But that had a big impact on me as a kid. My brother and I both, because over there in Taiwan at the time, they had the United States Taiwan Defense Command.
Uh-huh.
So it was a big Navy command back then. But there was one Marine colonel that my brother and I met, and he made a real big impact on both of us. Um, and growing up, that was always something I had always wanted to do. I mean, we were the typical boys. We after we left Taiwan, we moved back to Northern California, and it was always playing soldier, kind of always getting out there in the dirt, and we'd go camping up in the hills, and
Same stuff that boys do.
yeah, it's what well boys what we used to do
Right, right.
before all the screens and video games, and we were out
Before
there.
the mid 90s revolution of
Yeah,
technology.
yeah, we were always out there getting dirty, and wearing camouflage and all that, and um, so growing up in Northern California, there wasn't a whole lot of military, but the colonel, I don't even remember his last name, but I still can kind of see him. He just he was just such an impressive person, and so my brother and I both, we went on through school, and I was actually I came to Christ at a fairly young. I don't know, say I was 13 years old,
Hmm.
and one of Elvis Presley's stepbrothers. Trying to remember his first name was last name was Stanley, not Paul Stanley. He wasn't with Kiss. He was the other. But he came to town there, and were living in Modesto at the time, and in Northern California. And he came there, and I remember being, like I said, 13 years old, and I went up and I accepted Christ that day. But it all kind of goes back. I had one of my good friends, and I've always wanted to kind of to thank him. One of my friends growing up, his name was Craig Harris. Craig lived down the street from me. Every week they had an event for their church before middle school. Every week Craig would invite us, and I came up with excuse after excuse after excuse. Didn't want to go, and finally, I don't know if I just ran out of excuses or just I just gave in. I said, all right, I'll go with you, and that changed the course of my life.
Right on.
Yeah. So I always think I haven't really seen Craig since we've been adults, but I've always, had that. I owe him a huge debt that I don't know that I'd ever be able to repay because, it's that multiplier effect. Not only did his um, and
Invitation.
yeah, his invitation and his persistence.
Mhm.
Um, not only did it impact me, but me and my kids and their families, and I mean, it's just it's going to have a generational effect. So just the idea of one 13-year-old kid inviting another 13-year-old kid to go to a middle school church event.
Yeah, imagine that. How, even here at our church,
Yeah,
we're always putting it on our kids to, keep inviting their friends.
yeah,
And I guess at their age, they don't really see the kind of effect that has when they do that. But
yeah,
your
and
your
that's
story is a living testament to that.
yeah, and that's kind of going. I know how big the youth ministries are here, and I know there's a lot of kids in this area, and there's not as many churches as as kids, and just having them here, and just if you have friends that are out there that don't know Christ, I mean, this is the perfect place to get them to. And like I said, they might turn you down the first 20 times, but
Stay at
all
it.
it yeah, all it takes is one time for them to come.
Yeah.
So we and I grew up in church too. Pretty much after that, it was we there was a church down the street, not too far from our house, that we went to, and mom was real big on that, and dad went because mom said he had to go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
The way it was in the
yeah,
'80s.
yeah, the way it was, and we ended up. I mean, that just became our life. Monday, or it's not Monday, excuse me, Sunday. We're there for Sunday school. We would go to church, then we'd come back Sunday evening for youth, and then we were back Wednesday night for Wednesday night church service. It was just that's what we did. I mean, I wasn't one of those kids that went out, running around, because my dad was always um, pretty open with things, and so like we had a whole refrigerator of beer on the back patio.
Mm,
We had a pool in the backyard too, and so he's like, "Hey, you know what? If you want to have a beer with your friends, no problem. You're just not going anywhere." And so, I mean, so for me, sneaking out with the guys to go get beer and drink in the field, that was kind of dumb, because I had good beer at the fridge, and Dad would let us sit in the house and drink beer and watch a football game or watch a baseball game, whatever.
hmm
So it's
Keep it in a controlled
yeah,
environment.
and that's I didn't realize when you're growing up, you always think your parents are dumb, and I had that kind of revelation when I was in my early 30s, and I had that talk with my dad, and it's like I said, all those things that you always told me, I thought you were just being just being a dad. I said I never gave you the credit for for what you really know, and the way you guided us.
Hmm.
And so I think there's a lot of teens out there who um, don't think that their parents are really looking out for them, but you know your parents are a whole lot smarter than you think they are.
Right.
you know and so so for, I was I would say I was a pretty good kid. I didn't go out and get in trouble. I wasn't out drinking on the weekends, and
Mhm.
you know I I was a good kid, and all. And then college hit, and I went down to my back in as it 1984. I graduated that spring. Went down to L.A. to Loyola Marymount University,
Mhm.
and pretty much discovered that beer came in kegs.
Mm.
And so it was like my first 2 years of college was a lot of drinking, a lot of going out, getting in trouble, and the way I put it, Dad recalled me like a used Pinto. So after 2 years of college down there, he said, I'm not paying for you to go down there and do that anymore. If you want to go to college, you got to come home."
Mhm.
And so I kind of that's kind of where I was at the point. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I kind of drifted away from my faith, and I was doing my own thing. And I just I was always thinking about joining the Marines. Like I said, and then I was like, hey, I'm going to take some time off from college, figure out what I want to do. And I went down to the recruiter's office, and I said, yeah, I want to join the Marines. And um, my dad convinced me to start off with the reserves. So I went down on May 25th, 1986, enlisted in the Marine Reserves as a field radio operator.
Mhm.
And then that that got me started. Um, yeah, it's that whole adage, a Marine is not something you do; it's something you become.
Mhm.
And that really made a big impact on me. And going through um, my time enlisted, going through the reserves, I kind of refocused on what I wanted to do, changed schools, came back up to my parents living in Sacramento by then, and I went to Cal State Sacramento. Basically restarted college and went through and got a business degree with about a 3.3 GPA, and kind of refocused my thing. And of course, that's also when I met my now wife.
Hmm.
We worked together. I worked at a lumber yard, so it was kind of good, for staying in shape because I was out there. I worked 40 hours a week. Uh, you
And
know,
all of it is a workout all day.
oh yeah, work out all day, just lifting big heavy beams, bags of concrete, and all that, driving a forklift and all. But uh, you know, before I met my wife, though, had a few wild years in there as well, and
Hmm.
then I would say that when I met my wife and brought her home, she was the first girl my mom approved of in probably a couple years, and
Hmm.
I figured she was a keeper, and
Yeah,
uh,
it's good to get mom's stamp of approval.
yeah, once I had mom's stamp of approval, I pretty much knew she was the one,
Right on.
and so we dated for quite a while, and then when I graduated from college, I got commissioned in the Marines, and we got married. All that from May of 1991, and then fast forward to October, we are, two newlyweds in Quantico, Virginia, as I'm going through. Uh,
Yeah, if you want a little bit more Marines in your Marines,
yeah,
go to Quantico.
yeah. So I was went through going through the basic school there as a
Mm.
brand new second lieutenant, and it was tough, but it was. I mean, I know for her it was hard because we were gone so much, but for me, just having her there, every night when I came home, made a big difference. But I tried going through the training. I mean, we got through the 6 month training, and then I had orders to Pensacola, Florida, to go to flight school, and so we finished up the basic school there, which was 6 months long, and we headed down to Pensacola where my older brother was, because he was about 2 years ahead of me.
Hmm.
So he was
Was he
just
also in the
yeah,
Marines? Okay.
he's a retired lieutenant colonel,
Okay.
and he ended up he since he was about 2 years ahead of me. Flight school takes about 2.5 years,
Hmm.
so I got down there for his last couple of months, and so we lived just around the corner from him for a few months,
That's cool.
and then but the rest of our careers we were on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world from each other.
As it usually is.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. When you're in the military, you 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 give up a lot of stuff with your families,
Hmm.
and so it also does make your family a whole lot closer because that's all you have really is each other.
Yeah, and the time y'all do have together, I mean, that's precious.
Hmm. Yeah, but even after we got married and we went through all the training, I went through flight school, and then I had orders to go to Southern California. And I mean, I was still just doing my own thing. We were married. Everything was just, we're all learning new things. And then, I'm in my first squadron, um, and uh, my first deployment was um, rough, you say. And I wasn't at that point. Weren't sure whether our marriage was going to make it or not,
Hmm.
because, like I said, this was back in what I refer to as my dark ages, from about 18 to 28. Where, I mean, like I said, I wasn't a good person.
Right.
I mean, it was drinking, out all night with my buddies, and it was more. I was just more interested in having a good time than being a good person.
Right.
My first deployment, we went out for 6 months from June to December of '95, and I saw a good chunk of the world from the inside of bars. I mean, I couldn't really tell you what else there were in those countries. All we did was we went there and we drank, and we drank a lot.
Yeah.
And like I said, coming home from that deployment was uh, it was interesting. I mean, to put it was tough because getting back into being a family, and right before that deployment, we had our first daughter. Shannon was born in uh, May of '94, and then I ended up. She was just a little over a year old when I left. So I mean, was still just thinking about me.
Hmm.
Uh, just so happens though, God always puts the right people in your path, and
Yeah, he's good at that.
yeah, and so there's another good friend of mine that a guy named Mike Newell. Mike lived down the street from us there, and we were stationed in Southern California at Tustin. And after I got back from that deployment, here in the spring of '96, Mike and his wife Deborah invited us to go to Sunday school or to go to church with them, and so we went. And then we like they invited us to go to Easter service with them. And we ended up going, and um, we pretty much never stopped since. But that was the point where I kind of realized that I was responsible for more than just me.
Hmm.
Because in '96 also, Lori got pregnant with our second daughter, and I kind of had that revelation that um, these kids are my responsibility, and I needed to quit being so self-centered and self-focused, and be more focused on them. But I mean, the mentality, of sometimes the military will give you whatever you look for.
Hmm. Yeah.
And and those times I was looking for the guys that want to go out and have a great time, and go out and party all the time, and there's lots of those guys too.
Oh yeah,
But
especially in the Navy and the Marines.
yeah, you
We're
hit the
kind of known for that.
yeah, you hit port, and you just everybody kind of, it's almost like a college frat night
Yeah.
where everybody just goes crazy, and everybody just lets loose. But
Yeah. Try and drink the port dry.
yeah, and we did a lot of that. But then there was a lot of things that happened in between, and uh, being around in my second, when I was getting ready for my second deployment. Um, yeah, we had a helicopter crash, and we always have different jobs in the squadron. And my first deployment, I was one of the junior officers in the squadron, so I was the admin officer and adjutant. So I was always hanging around the head office and working for the commanding officer. But my second deployment, the job I have is what they call the flight officer.
Hmm.
I was responsible for the daily flight operations and all the daily scheduling. So we had a crew that went out. Um, we were on the USS Peleliu out off the coast of California.
That was a good ship.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, out of the ones I deployed on, I think that was definitely a good ship to deploy on. Had a good crew. We had a really great working relationship, between the Navy and Marine Corps. It's like that was, looking at that, that's how things should work.
Hmm.
But when you're the person responsible for the schedule and you put a crew together, they went out for night ship qualifications on night vision goggles, and they on one of the smaller deck ships, the USS Juno, they clipped an antenna, and the aft rotor system just disintegrated, and the helicopter flipped over back into the water. And I still see um, uh, the four guys that died that night. Major Dennis Dogs, Captain Paul Barnes, and then the crew chief is Mike Soros, and the observer Rudy Trujillo. And um, I still remember I was just getting out of I was just got done flying, and I was back on the flight deck, and Paul Barnes and Dennis Dogs were about to get into the aircraft in front of us, and I still see to this day Paul standing there by the island of the ship with all his gear on, ready to go take his last flight. That was when you're the one that's responsible for putting them there. Um, a big burden. And
Mhm.
there was a few guys in the squadron that, I don't want to, I'm not going to say any names. I don't want to say anything negative about anybody and call them out, but to come to find out that there was something in one of the crew's training that wasn't completed ahead of time, and having
Something that should have been.
something that they
Okay.
should have had training complete that we thought was done, but actually wasn't. The record that we used to put the crews together was inaccurate.
Mhm.
And to have somebody come up to me afterwards and say, "How about that training he didn't get?" Like it was, it was my fault for, putting him out there.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, like I said, that haunted me for quite a while. And to not, um, you know, to just to let that go, coming back, and I still remember going to their service. They, that was a tough day. And I still remember, like I said, I can see all four of their faces. Um, but like I said, haven't there, but for the few people that were kind of like pointing fingers at everybody,
Mm.
there was more than a few that you know there there was real. I mean, from the information I had, everything I did was right. And so
With the information that you had.
yeah, and it wasn't something that was critical. It was I don't want to say not necessary, but it was. I mean, it was something that was required, but it was something that, if known ahead of time, they might have made the decision to say, "Ah, it's okay. We don't have to worry about that. Go ahead."
Right.
But it wasn't. You
It
know,
was important, but it wasn't a red line.
right, right. That's a good way to put it. It wasn't something where you would have shut everything down. It would have
Right.
been. We would have probably gone to the commanding officer and said, "Hey, we just found out he doesn't have this. Is it okay?" And he may or may not say, "Yeah, go right ahead." But just to lose four guys like that, and it was um, Mother's Day weekend,
Mm.
and you know, so there was four four moms
Yeah.
who lost their sons.
Yeah.
So that was a real tough thing, um, dealing with that, and you know, a lot of praying about it, and but like I said, for all of the people that were negative about it, there were some good friends that you really came alongside and put things in perspective for us. Um, you know, I guess that's that whole thing. Flying helicopters or planes, whatever, it's inherently dangerous. We try not to take unnecessary risks, but sometimes things happen.
Yeah. And you try and mitigate the risk that you
Yeah,
know you
but
can't do anything about,
yeah,
or at least fully eliminate.
right. So I mean, when things like that happen, it really kind of makes you question things,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
and yeah, but it was, we ended up that happened in May of uh, '97. We ended up going out in August. We didn't go out as scheduled. I mean, you just pick up and go.
Yeah.
But the big difference, though, between the first deployment and the second deployment, um, I had some good friends, and um, the two guys, Craig and Lance, and we all went to the same church together because when Mike invited us, I met with these guys were there, and like Craig Hunt was his name, and uh, I had actually Craig was with us on our first deployment. I didn't really know him real well because he wasn't in the crowd that I ran with. And
Right.
so a composite squadron's got about 70 pilots in it, and so you don't know them, but you're not really friends with them.
You're more acquaintances. You
Yeah,
you know of each other.
yeah. But Craig and Lance though ended up being exactly what I needed
Mhm.
because we kind of three of us going out on the deployment together. We kind of made an agreement, uh, about accountability,
Yeah.
and we all agreed that if I'm out there and I'm doing something stupid, you have my permission to grab me and take me back or knock some sense into me, whatever it took.
Mhm.
And so when you're going out there in an area, areas where there is a lot of temptation, there's a lot of things that can distract you. Having good friends that are watching your back.
Yeah.
We weren't always together either, because Lance was with one of the ground units, but we would still cross paths. We'd see each other on board ship, and
Mhm.
when we would go
It's
in.
a big ship, but it's not that big.
Yeah, yeah. But when you
Especially up in O country.
yeah, but when you get into port and we'd all we weren't always with same groups, but like I said, we always knew that each other were around, and if we ever needed anything, that we were there for each other. I think that made a big difference, um, between when you're trying to do things on your own versus having somebody there who can you know who's got your back. I've always thought that was a big thing with accountability for each other, to have somebody who's there, no matter what, and you know that they've got your back and you've got theirs.
Mhm. Yeah, that's huge. I mean,
Yeah,
that's part of what community itself is all about.
right. And there's a, I mean, uh, the first squadron I was in was there. There was divisions within it. I mean, the first deployment guys pretty much treated the second deployment guys like crap. Just like this is your first time out, and so they it's your rite of passage kind of thing, and so you know. But we tried on my second deployment. We tried not to do that on purpose.
Mhm.
We tried to make sure that we wanted that next group to feel welcome. We wanted one squadron instead of groups within it.
Yeah, trying to change the culture a little bit.
Yeah, and with the commanding officer we had then, I think we were kind of successful in doing that. Um, but it, going out on deployments is always interesting. You never know what you're going to find. You never know where you're going to go. I know going back to that first deployment, we were in Jordan when the Iraqi generals all defected into Jordan.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we are kind of there. Here we
You're
got
conveniently there.
yeah, we got 2,500 Marines and the Iraqi army. Like we're hoping we just please don't have them cross the border to come in. Yeah, I mean, we would do what we could, but it wouldn't last very long. So I mean, just having all the different things come up while we're out. Um, that I mean, I did enjoy all the time that I was out on deployments, and when I got back from my second deployment, it was time to move on to my next squadron,
Mhm.
and that like I said, God always puts you where you're supposed to go, and for my second deployment, like most guys coming off of your first deployment or your first tour as a pilot, you, you've you, you've worked out you've worked pretty hard to get where you're at, and for me that first squadron was about 4 years.
Mhm.
So it was 4 years of long days and working hard. So of course you want to go get something that you think is going to be like a cushy job. And when we call them the monitor, so when they came to the guys who cut your orders, and he came and I met with him, and I said, yeah, I want to go to flight school, be an instructor. He's like, yeah, I can't let you do that. You haven't paid your dues yet. You're brand new. You've done 4 years. You're not ready to go be an instructor. He said, well, how about search and rescue? I'm like, yeah, that sounds interesting. Like, where at? He said, we got Yuma, Arizona, Buford, South Carolina, or Cherry Point, North Carolina.
All the places you don't wanna go as a
Yeah,
normal
but
person.
I had several friends though at Cherry Point,
Mhm.
because that's where most of the Harriers were, and
Yeah.
I had several friends that were Harrier pilots, and I was like, went
So at
home.
least there's something there
Yeah, at
to
least there's something there, and I mean it's not too far from Lejeune. It's only an hour drive, and so
Mhm.
there's I had lots of friends in the area, and one thing I always did though too is I tried in my career wherever would go. Yeah, I would kind of pick the job and let Lori pick the location.
Mhm.
'Cause I wanted to be somewhere she wanted to go, and so we talked about it, and I told him I wanted to go to Cherry Point, and so we ended up in this was '98 by then, and so I ended up having to go the entire summer going through training to be able to transfer to that search and rescue squadron. I had to go to school in San Diego for a while to transition.
You had to go to school in San Diego?
Yeah, I know
Sounds
I know that
tough.
was the tough part. That's
Sounds tough.
it was like a 4 week school in San Diego, and then I guess payback I had to go to Wichita, Kansas
Oh,
for
ouch.
about another four weeks. Then I had to go to Norfolk for about 2 months.
Oh, you got some Navy up in your career now.
Yeah, yeah, and so because I didn't realize when I agreed to do search and rescue that I also was going to get to fly the C-12, which is a little twin engine prop. And
Mhm.
so when they told me I'm going to Wichita and Norfolk, I'm like, What for?" And they're like, "Yeah, you're going to fly the C-12." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I was kind of, I took the orders not even realizing it. I was
Mhm.
thinking I was just going to go fly helicopters, and so I went and you got to fly uh, King Airs and H-46 helicopters, and I met some really.
Oh, you were up in the frogs.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
Nice.
a frog pilot. I do miss that thing. Every now and then I'll have guys will be online and they'll have like just the sound of those engines cranking up
Mhm.
just brings back such great memories. Um, but
The funny thing about the frogs, though, is I remember when I was on the Boxer, similar platform.
mhm,
I remember during the night operations, we'd be up on Vulture's Row
mhm,
watching the helicopters warm up and get
yeah,
ready to take off. And like to me, it was the coolest thing
uh
to watch those blades go around.
yeah,
And because they're kicking up so much
yeah.
turbulence,
Oh yeah.
you would see the tips
All
of
the
the rotary wings like
Well, we had little
glowing or
lights in them,
something.
but they also they kicked up a lot of static electricity.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and it had kind of this halo effect to it.
Yeah. That was
Yeah,
so cool to see that.
yeah, especially in the desert environments, you just have
Oh,
so
really?
much dust in the air. It was a light show.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, going to Cherry Point was a great move for me, especially after, like I said, that 97, 96, 97, kind of turning my way back towards God.
Mhm.
Um, because there's Cherry Point, and for those of you that have never been to Cherry Point, it's in this little tiny town called Havelock, North Carolina,
How
and
much is there?
uh, well, Havelock had a Taco Bell. And I think it
So
had
there's something
yeah,
at
it had,
least.
like, I think 1 or 2 Chinese restaurants that were
Hmm.
pretty good, but it's a small town.
Hmm.
I mean, it was all there because of the bases there, and, and some of the guys that I met there, that I was flying with, and the guys that I'm still friends with today, and they were just like I said, me just kind of moving my life back towards serving God again, put me in a situation where I met some really strong Christian men. Um, One of the good friends of mine, name was Jeff Bingham, and Jeff was about a year ahead of me there at Search and Rescue, and he kind of took me in and showed me around, introduced me to everybody, and Jeff is a real strong Christian man, and he's uh, he was a great Marine officer and a great father and all, and having him it really kind of helped me along. And then, of course, they invited us to go to the church that they went to, and so we ended up going there. And being that it's such a transitory town, I mean, the congregation was a lot of Marines and a lot of people who worked at they had one of the depots there for aircraft maintenance that
Hmm.
a lot of the local people worked at. There's kind of a mix between military and locals, but it was a fairly young group.
And half the population's in flux because you got
Yeah,
so much turnover on the base.
right. And so, we got involved there, and it was a really kind of what you would want out of a little southern church,
Hmm.
and in so they ended up um, because there was such a young group. They had this is a church that had deacons,
Hmm.
and so they had men that would be there to be counselors and uh, you know be there for other men, and they after we were there for about 6 months, they asked me if I would wanted to do that well for the rest of the time that I was there, and I did. And so they I became a deacon at that church, and I was, I think back then maybe 32, 33 years old, and it's like, I mean, I'm thinking to myself when I'm really young to be doing something like this. I mean, I'm still making all these mistakes myself.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think worked out good for me too, though, is um, to be a deacon there. Um, they ask that you not drink,
Hmm.
because it's like, how can you go counsel somebody who's having problems with alcohol, and if you're doing it too?
Hmm.
And being on search and rescue where I was on call a lot,
Yeah.
it was basically 3 years of being on an hour recall, and them asking me not to drink, and it worked out. That it fit in pretty well with what I was doing, and so I didn't drink for almost 2.5 years.
Hmm.
And it was kind of interesting how things in my life really kind of mellow out. And so uh, it's the time I was there, like having that, having Jeff and some of the other guys in the squadron. It kind of, I think those were some of the best years when we were young at that for that age. Uh, you know, I, hopefully I still have even better years ahead, but that was a really good time for us.
Hmm.
Another guy that I met there is a, one of probably my pilot mentor. Name was Jim Snellgrove. His call he was a Harrier pilot. His call sign was Spaz. So, but he was flying the King Airs with us, and like I said, he was really my mentor when it came to being a professional pilot.
Hmm.
And of course, now he's flying for FedEx, flying cargo, where he doesn't have to deal with people as much, and so he's
Perfect for a Marine.
yeah. So he's out there flying for FedEx. Last I heard, he was still doing that. But
So, what was your call sign, by the way?
actually, my call sign I had when I first got there for at Cherry Point. I got there and I had I was assigned to the maintenance department,
Hmm.
and I walked in to check in with the maintenance officer, who was this kind of salty old major, um, John Cunningham, and he looked at me and he goes, "Hayes, huh? Woody Hayes, that's your new name."
Where did that come from?
he,
He
he's
just pulled it out of the thin blue air.
he was a big sports fan, and
Uh
he literally pulled it out of the air, and that stuck.
huh.
And so from then on, everybody called me Woody.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
and
then
so
Toy Story came out. You hated it.
yeah, yeah. But believe it or not, I actually have a little stuffed Woody doll that my kids got me. So I can't get rid of it because my kids got it for
Awesome.
me. But yeah, flying search and rescue was a great time in my life because um, when you're doing something that is kind of giving back. 'Cause that search and rescue, when they disbanded it when they got rid of the CH-46s. But while we were there, we averaged about 100 missions a year of, no kidding, pulling people out of the ocean, going out to some bad car accidents, and medevacing people to the nearest hospitals.
Oh, wow.
And so it, the 3 years that I was there, I mean, I was flying a lot, and I think I ended up in my 3 years there was 14 life saving flights.
Hmm.
So balancing that with what happened earlier in my career with losing the crew of four, you know, kind of think that's why God put me there. After losing four, we saved 14.
Hmm.
So I think that I still remember um, the very first mission that I went on. I was flying as the co-pilot with another friend of mine named Andy Hessen, and we got the call of a single car accident out in the country, and there was the kid was trapped in it,
Hmm.
and so we took off and flew out there, and we landed um, right as they were getting him. They were using the jaws and the saws, and they were cutting him out of this. Is a smaller pickup truck that rolled and hit a tree, and it was mangled to where you hardly could tell it was a car.
Oh, wow.
And they were cutting this kid out, and we basically landed in perfect time. Our guys went over, they had the big litter, took it over there, set it down, and they put him straight into our litter. We loaded him up and got him to the hospital, which was only about 15 minutes away. Um, and that we from the time of the accident to when we had him at the hospital was maybe 45 minutes. And we always kind of where I'm going with this one is that we always had our guys check in on the patients that we helped. Just kind of we
Mhm.
wanted to know how things turned out for him,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we were told that he was doing good. Um, and then uh, fast forward to about a year later, we had the big air show at Cherry Point, and being the search and rescue guys, we'd have one helicopter was on duty across the runway with the crash fire rescue guys,
Hmm.
and then another one of the helicopters was
On
on
display.
display,
Yeah.
and it was my time to be on the one on display. And um, I had this lady walk up to me, and she said, "You know, um, my son was rescued by you guys about a year ago, and I don't know if any of the guys who were on that flight are here." I said, "Well, what's his name?" And she told me his name. And I said, "Well, that corpsman right back there is Doc Jaggers." I said, "That's the guy that took care of your son." Like I said, this is 24 years ago. Still gets me to this day. Um, that mother and her daughter, they stood there crying, thanking all the guys on the flight. Um, come to find out, her son made a complete recovery from a severe head injury
Oh wow. Praise
because,
God for that.
yeah, because we got him to the hospital so quickly. And, but just, I mean, that to just see that mom have an opportunity to thank the guy who saved her son's life.
Yeah.
And like I said, we had our corpsmen that we had there were phenomenal. I mean, they're some of the bravest guys I ever served with.
Because they were Navy.
Well, and the things they did. I mean, um, we had also, later in '99, they had Hurricane Floyd rolled through,
Hmm.
and there was, if you look back, there was a lot of flooding from Hurricane Floyd.
Hmm. I remember that.
Yeah, and of course they called up the day before the hurricane hit, and they're like, "Yeah, hey, the general wants y'all to fly these helicopters to Tennessee." And this is way back before we had all the avionics on these helicopters. They were like, they're not rated for that kind of weather. I looked at I looked at the Weather Channel and watched that. Like, no, I'm not going. They're like, no, the general wants you to go. I'm like, no, not going. I'm not flying in this. It's beyond the capabilities of the helicopters. If you want
Hmm.
to find somebody that can fly them, go right ahead. And we ended up, the general that they were talking about, we flew with him about every week, and he
Hmm.
knew us, and we knew him really well. And he's like, fine, if their choice is they don't think it's safe, then don't go, and just hangar the aircraft. And so we did that, and about 30 minutes after the storm broke, we took off with two aircraft, and we started pulling people out of the water, and we started pulling people off rooftops. We started searching for people who were missing, and one of our corpsmen, Rob Brown, chief, he retired as a chief. He passed away a couple years ago from uh, some complications, but um, they had one house where people had gone up into the attic and the water was still rising, um, and they had kicked out the eave vents, and they were trying to signal for help because like I said, the water's still coming up, and
Hmm.
that water was moving pretty fast.
Wow.
They knew they couldn't swim. Somebody had to rescue them, or they weren't going to make it.
And time was limited.
Yeah, and so they're being that they're under the eaves, there wasn't really a good way to do it, and so Doc Brown put on his harness and all that, rappelled down, intentionally started swinging to get under the eaves, crawled in the eave vents, put one person at a time in a harness that he took with him, swung back out under the helicopter, and they went and set him on dry ground.
Wow.
He did that like 6 times.
That's some cojones right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I say, Rob Brown was probably one of the bravest men I ever knew.
Yeah.
And I mean, just the things that those guys did. I mean, we had one of our swimmers, Dave Comiskey. He was a gunnery sergeant. Had a guy that was got washed away and somehow found himself clinging to a tree for his life in this water that's probably moving 30 miles an hour.
Mm.
Dave Comiskey gets down there, still attached to the helicopter, swimming across the current so it'll take him down. And it took him a couple tries. And he probably had, I mean, these rescue swimmers that we had, these are not just average swimmers. These are
Hmm.
the attrition rate at uh, swimmer school is about 25%.
Hmm.
Excuse me, about 25% make it through.
Hmm.
And these are your guys that are swim team, water polo, guys that are in the water all the time growing up, and only
And they're
25.
the ones that are
Yeah,
washing out. Yeah.
yeah, and only 25% make it through. So it tells you what kind of athletes these guys are.
Right.
And Dave Comiskey had took him several tries where I don't think he could have done it again, and he got to that guy. And he same thing, put a harness on him, got him in the water, and pulled him to safety. But you know, being a pilot, and I mean, we're just I'm trying to keep us. We're trying to keep just a stable platform to let these guys do their jobs, and they did amazing things. You know, and it was a really great group of guys, and to be there for 3 years with them. And you know, one of our guys, no kidding, we had a crew chief whose name was Robert Duvall. Yeah,
No
yeah,
kidding.
yeah. Not,
Wow.
not the same Robert Duvall, but yeah, yeah, you know,
Well, tough break there. You could have
yeah,
got an autograph. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, Sergeant Bob Duvall. Is a great crew chief, great Marine. And but we had our commanding officer was actually on a trip overseas when all this happened, and he called us up and he said, "Hey, what's going on over there?" He said, "Well, you know, so the hurricane hit, and we're pulling people out." And said, "Yeah, I just picked up the Stars and Stripes newspaper over here in Japan, and there you guys are on the front cover of it." So he's over, you know, halfway around the world and picks up a newspaper with his squadron doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was a pretty proud at that point. But
Yeah. He gets to show everybody, look, these are my guys.
yeah, but and he was actually, I think that was one of the trips he was with. They were taking the commandant of the Marine Corps over there, so he, you know, they had a, you know, pretty high powered entourages, you know, to show him
Yeah.
when he got back. And um, but that was a great time, and like I said, the right people that I was supposed to be with, and they did, you know, amazing things. Just a bunch of average guys though too. I mean, you know, you could have plug and play just about anybody, but you know, those were the ones that were there, and they did, I mean, amazing. Uh, and then from there, we after being at Cherry Point for 3 years, I ended up going over to Okinawa, Japan. Yeah, and for us, I mean, we absolutely loved Okinawa, Japan. One of our favorite places to live.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a beautiful little island.
yeah, it really is.
Beautiful waters to
Yeah,
swim in too.
yeah, beautiful waters, but also really dangerous with the currents.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But for somebody who's, you know, there with a family, there was so much to do. And again, first thing we did, ended up, you know, some having some friends that were already there, and they, you know, just like is really common with the military, they plugged us right into the church they were going to. And so, you know, being involved, and that was kind of one of the things that was also kind of a catalyst for me, because my kids were all involved in the Awana program at that church that we went to.
Hmm.
And I had no idea what that was back then. You know, it was just, you know, I guess it's just some church program that they ran. And so, you know, our 3 years there, we traveled some, and you know, we had a great time, and you know, it was a good experience for us. We had our three girls at the time, and so they experienced a lot. Uh, and like I said, just a lot of really good memories from Okinawa. 'Cause we didn't have a whole lot over there because, you know, most the house we were in. So we had a family of five.
Hmm.
We had an 1,100 square foot cinder block box, basically 2 story, three or I think it was, yeah, just 2 bedrooms. So we had
Hmm.
3, it was a 3 bedroom. What we did, we put all 3 girls in 1 bedroom and the other one was their playroom. And so, yeah, but it's just there was a lot of another really a good place to be. Met some and served with some really great guys, and some of them, like some of our friends that we were over there with, or here in the DFW area, and we go and visit with them every now and then. Some good friends of ours down in Waxahachie that were our backyard neighbors over in Okinawa. So I mean,
Hmm.
that's one of the benefits of the military. I mean, you meet so many different people. I mean, there you end up with some great friends. There's some people, to be honest, I hope I never see again. And
Hmm.
there's also some people that I wish I could live near all the time.
Right.
So
I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, so you end up with a whole spread. I mean, because I mean, believe it or not, the military is just a big slice of America. I
Hmm.
mean, you end up with,
Oh, 100%.
yeah. So I mean, you end up with people from all over the place
Oh
and
yeah.
all kinds of backgrounds. And I think that's one of the things that really also drew me to the Marine Corps, because it's like my wife didn't understand it for probably the first 10 years or so, but and I don't mean this to sound as an arrogant way, but when it comes to Marines, I'll do anything for another Marine.
Hmm.
Maybe other services, I don't know, but if there's a Marine in need, we're there for each other.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of that it's the Marine Corps. It's we're all brothers and sisters, and it's kind of looking at that first is like the first thing is you're a Marine.
Hmm.
And so then, because I got to admit, kind of, I'm an aggressive driver, and my wife's like, I'm not too hot on letting people cut in front of me and all that. But
Hmm.
every now and then, my wife, like, I'll stop up short and let some guy cut right in front, and she's like, "What was that for?" Like, well, you didn't see that Marine Corps sticker on his car? It's like I saw that from way back there. I was going to let
Hmm.
him in. So we take care of each other. You know, and
Well, there's something about like, you know, even in like the civilian workplace environment, you
yeah,
develop a camaraderie with
yeah,
the people you work with and your friends. But there's something different when you go through the experiences of combat or
yeah.
something like that. The camaraderie is forged by fire almost.
Yeah, well, and I'm one of those guys that I didn't go to Iraq or Afghanistan.
Hmm.
Uh, when it all kicked off, I was in Okinawa, and back then they weren't taking anybody out of Okinawa. And then, um,
You got to be ready in case
yeah, we had
North Korea or
all that,
China
yeah,
pops
all the
off.
yeah, all the stuff going on with Korea and all that. We
Mhm.
spent a lot of time in Korea, and one of those places I like to go to. But when I got done with Okinawa, uh, I had orders to go to HMX 1, and that is the president's helicopter squadron. And so, my choice was accept the orders to go to the president's helicopter squadron, or go take a job in the desert for a year away from my family. And so, I mean,
What do I choose? What
yeah,
do I choose?
that was a really really easy choice. So we're again back in Quantico. Um, so like I said, I didn't go to Iraq or Afghanistan. My brother, he did his first about 10 years on active duty, and then he had had enough, and he got out as a captain, and then 9/11 happened,
Mm.
and he's like, "What do I got to do to get back in?" And so he, he did one thing in his career that I thought was kind of as for a pilot, I didn't think was real smart. He went to infantry officers course because he had free time. So they have a pilot who's also an infantry officer. So guess where they took him when he came back in?
To infantry.
Yeah, he went straight to the battalion to be an air officer. So he did 2 deployments over to Iraq,
Mhm.
and he doesn't talk much about his time over there, but I know it impacted him. He has PTSD,
Yeah.
and he and I, because we moved all over the place as kids, we grew up really close. We talk a lot, and watching him go through it, and he would walk in a room, and the first thing he would do is look around like, "How do I get out of here?"
Mhm.
and so I mean he was uh, he was in it, and I mean if you look at the his you know medals and ribbons, he's got some V's on that,
Yeah.
which that means he got awarded for valor.
Yep.
For in other words, they were pulling triggers and
Making
there's
things happen.
yeah making things happen. He was an air officer. He was calling in airstrikes. He was making bad people disappear, and he was also calling in medevacs to get our guys out and to get our guys back to the care they needed. And I mean that takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
It, I always looked up to my brother a lot, and he did his time in the reserves. Like for here, I was active duty the whole time. I never went. He went to the reserves, and he went 3 times.
Mm.
And so he went, twice with the Marines, and then I don't know how he got talked into it. We went back for another time as a contractor.
They do like to abuse the reservists.
Yeah, but he actually went back as a contractor operating UAVs. And so when he was in the reserves, he got to working for one of Boeing's subsidiaries. He got into UAVs, and they wanted somebody to go over and operate them over there. And so he went and lived in a Connex box and flew remote controlled planes for 6 months. Uh, then he ended up now he and a couple of his buddies here they own a company that operates UAVs, and so we talk still, like I said, and he's I said things the way they're going right now. There's a lot of conflict in the world. He said it kind of one thing that's tough is having a job where uh, you business is a whole lot better when bad things are happening in the world.
Yeah.
So his business is going pretty well right now,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Which is good.
yeah, good for him financially, but bad for the people in
Yeah.
the areas where his guys are working.
Exactly.
But having him as a big brother, it was uh, that was the whole thing of always having somebody looking out for me. 'Cause I still remember, like he's a lot bigger than I am. His call sign in the Marine Corps was pipes because his arms are about the size of most people's legs.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was a gym rat. If he wasn't in the gym about 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, he didn't get to go to the gym. You didn't want to go hang out with him because he's going to be in a bad mood.
Oh wow.
So he would go take out all his aggression on the gym, and he was pretty big back then. And I still remember in high school and when I was a freshman, he basically cornered all the sophomores on the football team. He said, "Anybody touches my little brother, I'm going to take it out on you guys." So I had about 15, 20 sophomore football players basically watching out for me everywhere I went to school. And so that having a big brother like that, and I don't know that many people you know have a brother like that, but and having him you know uh, with his family, and he is also a real godly man. I mean, they attend Church of Christ, and he does. I mean, he leads a lot, and having him deliver the messages, and I mean, he's a great role model for a younger brother. Yeah, he's a great role model for any young man.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah,
Amen to that.
and so I mean, I gotta admit, I mean, I have been very blessed with the people God put in my life, and He put people into my life when I needed them the most.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I did my time at HMX1, and we were traveling all over the world, seeing all kinds of different stuff, and I mean, it was 4 years of deploying, like week and a half here, week and a half there. 4 or 5 days up in DC, and we always kind of joke that the HMX1, the X actually stood for ex-wives and ex-friends.
Ouch.
I knew several guys that I served there with ended up, their marriages didn't survive it because it was such a demanding job.
Yeah, because you got to travel anytime the
Yeah,
president does.
and you travel at whenever they say you travel,
Yeah.
and you could get back from a trip, come back from being gone for 10 days, and then they say, "Hey, sorry, we need you to go up to DC for the next 4 days.
Yeah, you got enough time to go get lunch
Yeah,
and
go
then
go go swap out your dirty
back
clothes for
out.
clean clothes and get up there."
Wow.
And so that was tough on families, and that's where having such an understanding wife, um, really really blessed to have a woman that was always there supporting me.
Amen to that. Hey, well, I hate to cut you off there, but we're gonna have to cut this off, and you and I can keep going, and we'll
Uh,
pick it up. And we'll
Okay.
do a continuation episode. So for everyone else, thank you guys for tuning in. Come back next week and we'll finish up our story with Matt Hayes.